Well, okay, so here is the long-awaited second half of the video where in the first half I just talked or showed how to prepare paper to be oil painted on. And in that video I said that I was going to follow that up with one where I showed you how to, or how at least how I mount paper, the prepared paper down to a panel. So it took me long enough to get to it, but I guess better late than never. So you saw there at the beginning, I just put one coat of this this acrylic gel medium in that paper, and that actually helps that what I'm about to do. It helps it so the paper doesn't shrink as much. You can do it, and I might, if I have time on this video, I'll show you maybe one where I don't put a coat of that down on the paper first. Now it's soaking into the back of the paper, so it is going to expand. And I cut this paper, I'll show you here in just one second. I cut the paper quite a bit larger than the panel that it's going to go on. So this acrylic gel medium is very versatile. And there are other things, I think maybe somebody even asked this question I need to answer. Would PVA glue work? And yes, PVA glue would work. PVA glue they make for stretching canvases. Whoops. And basically Elmers glue, all white glues, wood glues are all kind of some kind of PVA based glue. So yes, they would all work. The reason I use this is just because I have it, and I use it for lots of things, except for what it's intended for. I don't really paint with acrylics, so I did manage to wrinkle that nicely, but it shouldn't hurt. Okay, so here's the panel. This is a dye bond or aluminum composite panel or aluminum composite material, and this is a failed painting that I scraped down, and it's dry. It's been dry for a long time. I sanded it just recently with some 220 grit sandpaper on just a sanding pad, just to make sure it had tooth. So I like to, if I can, I like to kind of give the edges just a little bit of extra glue. So I kind of scrape that glue off, especially in the corners. Corners are always, the edges and the corners are always the parts that come up. You know, in the center, I don't really ever have any problems with that. Let's see. So that's still wet. And just take that, flip that over. Put it right in the middle. Get it all over make sure you get it all over your hands. So just flip that over. Now the reason I like that aluminum, and this is I think they call this a J roller, and you just pick, if you have a brayer, I think you could just use a brayer, or any flat roller like that will work. I think this is made for like putting down a countertop. Looks like I got a little, may have a little tiny bump in that one, something I might have missed. These rollers are for putting down formica on countertops when you're working with contact cement. Now actually, this might be a good opportunity to show. You can see it's not adhered. It's still wet. Okay, so looks like that was something right there. Yeah, that's something, something I got in there I didn't see. Okay, so it's pretty forgiving. There we go. And so that's it right there. That's one method for mounting the paper. Oh, and I also wanted to mention too, in the last video, I was using watercolor paper. And currently I don't have any watercolor paper. And lately I've been working with, this is Hanamulla drawing paper. So, and that shows you the versatility of this. It does not matter what kind of paper you use. So anyway, that's down. Now the tricky part of this one is, so obviously when things, paper or products like this get wet, they expand. And so the trick with this is, again, to use a hair dryer. This is a little 1500 watt hair dryer that I've had forever. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep pressing this down, because the paper is going to, as it dries, it's going to want to, as it shrinks, it's going to also want to peel up. And I'm going to keep the center wet. You can actually even spray the center with a little bit of water. So we're trying to keep the center wet, so it's not going to pull. And what we're going to do is go around and get these edges dry with the hairdryer. So those corners just keep wanting to pull up as that paper shrinks down. And the J roller, oh, and I also wanted to mention too, when you're using a roller at this stage, don't push too hard. If you push really hard, you'll just squeeze all the glue out. So I'm using light pressure on it, and as it begins to dry, you can push harder and harder. So you just kind of keep with it until they feel like they're down. Now, if one of them does peel up and doesn't want to go back down, it just the glue's already dried. You can usually peel the corner up, stick a little bit more glue in there, push it back down, and then hit it with a hairdryer. And so it's still really wet in the middle, especially where I put that water. So I just stay with that for a while until I'm sure those are down. And so let's hit that with a hairdryer just a little bit more. All right, that's down. It's pretty dry. Now it feels dry to the touch, but I've done this enough times to know that the glue is still wet down in there, and those can still peel up. That paper is still pulling. Let's see, and especially where you can see, I put a lot of extra glue on those edges. It does take a while to get all the glue down there dry. So don't walk away and think it's good because it feels dry. What I would recommend at this point is to put something heavy on it. And I usually use a very large book, some gigantic big book, and then just put a bunch of pressure on that, 2 or 3 books on that, and leave that for a couple hours. If there's any glue at all, or you don't want to hurt your book, I would probably put down some kind of release sheet, or at least a paper towel, so you don't, in case there's any glue on there, you don't want to get anything on your nice book. So you leave that for a couple hours. So that was the one coat in the beginning. So there's a coat on the back and one coat on the top. So with this drawing paper, since it's already toned, I'm not putting any tone on it. So no acrylic house paint or anything. So I'll probably do, and that was a really thin coat because I wanted that to really get down in the fibers of the paper. So I'll probably put 2 more coats of this on, and the last coat I put on will be fairly thick, but not so thick that I obliterate the texture of the paper. I really like the texture of this paper. So this is very similar, a similar process. So I got another piece of paper. It's the same drawing paper, and you can see how I just, you're going to want to cut it really straight like I did. I mean, that's brilliantly straight cut. I don't know what I was doing. Okay, so this is a panel made from masonite, and they don't think they make masonite anymore, or at least they don't make the brand masonite anymore. It's just an old piece of 1/8 inch. It's just a fiber board. I think MDF is more popular now, and I think on this one I have put gesso. Yeah, it was coated with gesso on both sides, and then I toned that. That's that house paint that I showed in the previous video, and that was just to give it a tone. And really, this panel is ready to go, but I decided that I wanted some more panels with paper on them because I really like this texture. So if you're going to do, if you're doing panels that are not like that dye bond, if you're doing any wood products, I always recommend to seal them first and to seal both sides. So it doesn't matter what you seal it with. You can seal it with gesso, you can seal it with paint, you can use like varnish or whatever you're using, but do both sides. If you don't do both sides, they all warp. Inevitably, you'll end up with a warped panel. If that doesn't bother you, you don't need to worry about it. But it bothers me. I always like my panels to be very straight. So both sides are sealed, not the edges, not all the edges. I actually like to seal the edges too, but I think I cut this one down to a smaller size, so it left a bare edge. You can see the gesso on that side. Okay, so I'm trying to remember which side I sanded. I think I sanded that side last night, and I was going to put this paper on there. So I'll just show you this really quick. This is the same procedure that I just showed you, and without any pre-wetting of the paper, just to show that you can do it either way. Also wanted to mention, this is the same procedure if you're mounting linen or canvas down. If it's got a really texture, if there's a lot of texture, I'd probably just use extra glue. And just for everybody out there, you really need to experiment because there are so many different substrates, panels you're going to use. You can experiment. You can use anything you want, anything you find that's, I think, stable. You got different papers, different linens, different canvases. There are so many different materials that everybody might be using. I would just recommend experimenting on whatever your whatever your materials are. And that the dye bond, and that's dye bond's a brand, but that aluminum composite panel is by far my favorite, but it's also one of the more expensive, and it may not even be available in your area. I think you can get smaller pieces online. I buy large pieces and here local, and then I just bring them home and cut them. I cut them up on my saw. So obviously wood. So I'll get a little bit of glue down in that corner that I damaged. A little extra glue on that. I like to do the paper first. When I do the paper first, it continues to expand and kind of soak in, and it doesn't dry as fast. The panel seems to dry faster, I think, just because it hasn't soaked the glue in. Okay, I think that's good. Whoops. There it is. You can see it's got a lot of bubbles and whatnot in it. If you don't have a J roller or a roller, you can just use your fingers, but it never, and if you need to, if it's bad enough, you can pull it up a little bit and then kind of push it back down. You can do that to the other side. If you don't feel like you got enough glue in there, you can just lift up. You can look too. You can say, let's see, it looks like that's a bubble right there. So it looks like it didn't get enough glue, but I think it did. Let's see. Yeah, that's a strange mark. Now that, maybe that's you could put a little extra glue in there if you want. That's just how forgiving this part of the process is. But yeah, you definitely don't want a spot that doesn't have glue, because it's going to bubble up later. And if you don't have a hairdryer, you can do it, but it's going to take a lot of time, especially if it's cold in your studio, because that glue underneath there is going to take forever to dry. So you'll have to just stay with it for who knows how long. I have tried actually at this point putting weight on it, and I suppose if you had enough weight distributed, maybe like a book press would probably be a good choice, because that would ensure that there's even weight everywhere. You'd probably be okay with that. But I've at this point I've put books on it before and thought I was good, and came back and one of the corners had pulled up. So that is doable, and again, experiment with that. And once you find the right weight or way to do it, that's great. I mean, if you can get away with using the hairdryer, that's great. But especially for making a video, I am going to use the old trusty hairdryer. Usually I start with my fingers a little bit, just because you can feel so much better, but the hairdryer gets so hot, it starts to burn my fingers, so then I switch to the J-roller. Oh, I think that one's down. It's nice and dry. Now, I'm doing small little panels here. If you're doing larger panels, it does become a little more difficult. Small panels are by far the easiest to do. So that, I can feel that warped maybe just a little bit. I think it's just because it's hot and it's wood product, but that'll straighten back out. That shouldn't be a problem. I think that one's done. So you can see you can do it with dry paper. And like I mentioned, if you're doing watercolor paper or something really heavy like that, same process. The paper is going to be a lot stiffer, and it's going to take longer to get, if you're using a hair dryer, to get the heat down in there to get that glue dry. So you might have to stay with the watercolor paper a little longer, but the watercolor paper also, because it doesn't expand and shrink nearly as much, you're not going to have the problems in the corner. So again, like I said, just experiment. Do some small panels that if they don't turn out, it's no big deal until you figure out kind of what works for you. All right, so this is a dry method. Actually, I'm not going to be using this material to glue it down. So I'll use that still to seal the paper once it's down. So this is just the same drawing paper, same color and everything. And this is a okay, well, let's see, let's start with this. So this is the dye bond panel that I was talking about, or the aluminum composite panel. That's a 3 mil thick. And so that's sanded. I always sand. That stuff comes that's got a real slick surface on it. So I like to give it a mechanical bond no matter what glue I'm using. And this glue is called Beva 371. So this is an amazing glue. This is a film, actually. They call this film, but it does come in a liquid form. So this is called Beva 371. And down in the link below, I'll put a link to where I get it. But I think there's several places you can buy it. But the warning is it's not cheap. It really is a very expensive glue, and it was really invented primarily to line historic paintings with new linen. So the conservators use it. It's a conservator's glue, completely archival, neutral pH, all that fun stuff. And it comes in 2 thicknesses. It comes in several. I kind of buy the larger rolls, and then I don't have to buy it for a long time. I think it's 2.7 mil, and I think it comes in a 1 mil. And I buy the thicker because I'm usually mounting. This is almost exclusively the way I mount linen to the panels. And one of the reasons I do it's just nice because I don't have the wet glue, and once it's down and cooled, it's down, it's permanent. But the one reason I use it for my bigger paintings and studies is if the panel ever does get damaged, if it gets hit or dented, the linen can be pulled off fairly easily, just with a little bit of heat. So yeah, this is a heat reversible glue. It melts at 150 degrees. And there might be, I know there's photographic films out there that you could experiment with that would work. And they would probably, I was thinking the 1 mil would probably work with these drawing papers. I probably don't need I think it's 2.7 mil. Just got to make sure that's clean. And so you peel off that one backer. So this glue has two backs to it. And once you get that positioned, so this is a tack iron. And before I got this used local. And if you don't have a tacking iron like this, you can use a clothes iron, just a regular old clothes iron. Temperature wise, like I said, this glue melts at 150 degrees. I usually turn my iron on cotton setting, or let's see, cotton, somewhere between cotton and linen. So it's pretty much the high settings on your iron. Now, if you are going to use the reason I have to set everything a little higher, believe it or not, because this is aluminum, it just sucks the heat out off the surface. And if you're using a wood product like the Masonite I just had on the last one, you can set the iron down probably to the next setting even lower, which I can't remember what that setting is. But yeah, there's something about that aluminum and its conductivity of heat. I always find I have to turn them up a little higher. This one's set not all the way up high, about 2/3 of the way. So I just do that. You have to kind of tack it down. So then the trick is to peel off the other sheet. So there's the plastic backer right there. And there is that glue right there. So that's why I like to tack all the way around the outside edges. And then you just take your paper and you can, now all you have to do, you just have to tack one spot. Now this is, I hesitated if I should even show this process because it involves so many specialized tools, and like the dive bond. But like I said, you can use Masonite or MDF or anything for this. It doesn't have to be die bond or the aluminum composite panel. Just make sure that's down. So what that does, if you've ever done any photography mounting, it's the same process as that. So that just holds it, and I only do one corner. Okay, so the next part of the video, I'll have to show you what I use now is my dry mount press that I picked up used, local. They're kind of expensive, so if you can pick up a used one, that's the ticket. But before I got that dry mount press, this is all I used. And if this is all you have, that should work fine. So once you get that tacked down, get the iron. And if you're using, like I said, if you're using the dye bond, you might need to turn it up to the like linen or cotton. Again, experiment, because everyone's irons could be different. And then you literally just iron it out until the glue sticks. It's not a danger as much with wood as it is this aluminum composite panel. But if you leave the iron in one spot too long, it will buckle it and it will never come back to flat. So when I'm doing it with an iron, I just keep the iron moving and just heat the entire thing up. If you're doing a huge panel like I used to, I do it in quadrants. I'll do kind of a fourth of the panel, and then another quadrant until I get it down. And it's a bear. It's not easy to do a large panel with a clothing iron. So I'm going to move over to my dry mount press, and I'll show you how we do that. Okay, so here's my dry mount press. It does about a 18 by 24. They make them smaller and they make them bigger. And like I said, I got this one used, so it was really a good price. It just makes this job so much easier than using your house iron, and that way I don't have to steal my wife's iron. That makes her happy, and it makes my job a lot easier. But yeah, like I mentioned earlier, if all you have is a clothing iron, it works just fine. So got this set. Let's see, let me slide that in. I wasn't really quite sure the best way to film this, but just stick that in there and put it down. I go about 30 seconds, 45 seconds. And I've got that set, let's see, I don't know, looks like the handle's in the way. I've got that set at about 175. And if I were doing that on a wooden panel, you could have it closer to 150. So again, that's just my experimentation. I've done it enough times to know. I don't want to get it too hot because the core of those aluminum panels is some kind of polyester plastic, and I've gotten those pretty hot before. So I don't want to heat that up, but I want to melt that glue. So no matter what your method is, iron or dry mount press, you just have to experiment. So let's just see what that does. It may not have been long enough, I'm not sure, but and then pull these out. It's just like pulling something out of the oven almost. They can be very, very, very toasty. So there it is. That's check it. It feels like it's down. Yep, the glue it's just really hot. It wrinkles around the edge just a little bit, but that gets trimmed off, and so there you go. But there's a little more complicated way to do it, but I like that. It's really slick and easy. Don't have to worry about waiting for it to dry or anything. I mean, as soon as that cools off, it's ready to go. All right, so here is the panel that just came out of the hot mount press. I trimmed the edges off, and I noticed when I trimmed the edges off, there were a couple spots that didn't adhere. They had bubbled up. And I kind of had a feeling I didn't leave it in long enough. I just not concentrating, just trying to shoot that video. But I just put it back in. It mounted down, really nicely. It's down really well. So it's a great feel. It's kind of interesting because it's drawing paper, but it's hard now. It's on a panel, so you really could use just as is for anything. I mean, you could draw on it. You could any water medium. You could acrylics. You could do gouache. You could do casein. You could do anything on that. You wouldn't have to do anything to that paper. It's ready for that. But for oils, like I mentioned in the earlier video, just needs something to separate the oils from the fibers in the paper. So to finish this off, just give it a few coats of my favorite, this Utrecht matte gel. I go 3 coats. Like I said, first coat really, really, really thin, just to kind of get it down there in the paper and let it dry, and then 2 more heavy coats. Also wanted to just show you guys this. I've also used the acrylic gesso to do the same thing that we did with this is the glue. This is a pretty good glue too. I can't remember, it's been a long time since I did that, but it has a few different properties. It seems like it might take a little longer to dry than this stuff. But that's also, if that's what you have and you don't have any of that, give this a try and see if you can glue things down with that. It's not a glue, but it acts like a glue. This isn't a glue either, technically, but it has the same properties as a glue when it dries. And here's some PVA glue that, this is, I don't know. I've heard that Elmers glue is not archival, and I don't know if it is or not. But I bought this a long time ago, and I use this line coat glue. But that's, if you had PVA glue, obviously that would work very good for this. Now this is a lot thinner, and so the consistency is going to be a little bit different. I guess that's what I was trying to say with the gesso. It's a thinner, this gesso, like I showed on the previous video, isn't my favorite gesso. It's too thin, and it's more of a porous surface. I like other gessos better than this, but these are real in a more of a liquid state. And what I like about this is the consistency, and that thick consistency really helps to bond the two surfaces together, and dries fast. So here's a few other panels. So that one, boy, you think I would have remembered because I just did it last night. That's got, I believe, 2 coats. I was going to say 3, but it doesn't quite feel like it has 3 coats on it. You can just kind of tell because that does give it a little bit, almost more like a satin. I don't think the camera's going to pick that up, but that's a very matte, obviously drawing surface, and that's got just a little bit of a satin sheen. I might hit that one more time just because I can't remember how many coats are on it. And one of these I did with the liquid glue with this, and one of these I did with my hot mount press, or sorry, my dry mount press. And I did this one the other day, same thing. These are all Hahnemühle drawing paper, and just different colors of it. So I'll get these all prepped up and play around with it. Again, in the last video I was showing everybody the process. I was using watercolor paper, and this is just a drawing paper that's, I kind of just like to change things up a little bit. I ran out of watercolor paper, and I had this kicking around, and I kind of like the surface this has. It's got a little more tooth than the watercolor paper, and it just adds a little different feel to when you oil paint on that. So if you guys want to give that a try, hopefully I didn't confuse anybody too much. I think that the Beva and the dry mount process is pretty involved. It takes a lot of things. The Beva glue is kind of pricey. Not many places sell it, and obviously you don't have to have a dry mount press. You can do it with an iron. Works just fine, but the mounting things down with this type of glue is the easier way to do it, really. So just remember about the paper shrinks when it expands when it's wet, and then as it dries it shrinks. So just as that happens, it wants to pull away from the edges. So just if you can find a way to combat that and get the thing nice and dry. Give it a nice coat, 3 coats of that, and go to town. So, all right, thanks everyone for watching. Appreciate it.